everybody. Grab your Bible and a pencil and a journal and maybe even a cup of coffee and join in on our conversation. But first, I would like for you to write this down. Genesis 3, verse 20. The man called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living.
Hey everyone, welcome to Write This Down with Dot Bowen. My name is Cara. I am Dot's daughter. And every week we sit down together and we have a conversation about the Bible and God's love. And in this conversation, we are talking about Mother's Day, which I know can bring up a lot of emotions for a lot of different people, whether good or bad. It could bring sorrow, it could bring joy. But our hope in this conversation is that you would find hope or comfort or just some sort of truth that whether you are experiencing a Mother's Day like you've always wanted, or if you are grieving in this Mother's Day, we hope that you experience God's love through our conversation. And we would love for you to pull up a chair and join in our conversation. Happy Mother's Day.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. You make being a mom very delightful.
Well, good. I'm glad.
I will not say that you make motherhood easy. But I will say, you make it fun and exciting.
Oh, thanks.
You never know. Yeah, sure.
I'd rather that than easy is so boring.
It is so, it's just so overrated. Yeah.
Anyway,
but here's little Adam. He's something that boy.
I'm going to pop in. I was thinking of this verse too. When we did a series on Genesis 3. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but that was the first time that I realized.
Yeah. He changed his
What did I
name.
realize? Oh, yeah, that he changed her, that she was a woman before.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I think it's one of those things that I knew subconsciously because I knew that God calls Eve woman, taken from a man and all that. So I knew that, but it didn't register that this is when
that he had changed it.
Yeah, because which I think that is also,
and there's a lot to that. It's not just that he changed it, but it was an indication that he had hope because they just sinned.
Yeah. So anyone, obviously feel free to go back and listen to whenever we talked about that in January, which I think that's also an interesting thing to point out too, is how easy it is for us to insert in scripture what we assume. So I would read Genesis 3 because I know Eve's name. So I would read Genesis 3 and almost insert Eve's name in the narrative because I know that,
right.
Versus just truly being in the narrative as it is. And I think that's why I missed it because I just kind of our brain just kind of can easily gloss over something or read past something
And that's a great Bible observation. That's called observation. And when you do study methods. And so a lot of times we'll, if you're in the New Testament, and this has nothing to do with Mother's Day, but if you're in the New Testament and they say he or whatever, and Jesus is talking, a lot of times in your head, you just think Jesus. But when you're really observing it, it's saying he, but anyway, so it's great Bible study.
Yeah, I think our brain just fills in blanks a lot of times without us realizing it. So, which kind of can go into Mother's Day. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how, but I'm sure there's some kind of.
I don't know how.
Yeah. I don't know. I was gonna try and transition it, but it's not.
Nope,
we're talking about Mother's
so
today.
Here we are.
Just spoiler.
That's right. That's right. And it's talking about Eve is now they have sinned. They are being cast out of the garden, and Adam renames Eve. Yeah, it's from Roman, which is meant.
Oh, woman. I thought you said Roman.
Yeah. Yeah, I probably did, but I meant Roman.
Okay, anyway.
And anyway, so I think it's interesting because here we are, about to enter into this Mother's Day, and it can be a hard time. It's hard for me. I miss my mom. And she's been gone for a long time, but I do know that there are some people that are really struggling. They've literally have lost their moms just recently. And then I know some people that I love very much that are dealing with their mom having dementia and, Alzheimer's, and they feel like their mom's already gone, even though that they're here. So Mother's Day can be really hard. People that wish they had children or wish that they're, struggle with infertility. So Mother's Day, can be a difficult time. And so today, as we talk about this, I think we want to be sensitive to understand it. So we're going to kind of talk about it in all kinds of contexts.
Well, I think it can be difficult for you because you've lost your mom. And for me, it can be difficult for me because that's a loss. I have a loss of not being a mom. I think on that side of it is difficult because, well, I think on both sides. I think because as women, we are made to nurture. That was a part, of
Mother of the living.
Yeah, that was part of God's image that we bear is, God is nurturing, God is caring, and that is, a lot of the woman characteristic and how we're made is to nurture and to care. And so when you don't have that through a human child, and I think that's also another thing that we can assume is like, oh, this is what motherhood should look like. And it is a loss or a void for sure. But at the same time, I think that's part of how God can redeem all things. And so, you may not be mothering a human, but, maybe
you're nurturing 3 dogs.
Yeah. I would literally said like a week or two ago because one of mine had surgery, which, and I was worried that, or I guess we were worried that he had cancer, which thankfully he does not. But I mentioned something to a friend of how my baby, and they were like, you have a baby? I was like, you know what I'm talking about? I was like, yes, I do. They're not human, but yes. But I was like, I made the comment of, I don't have human kids, so they get all of my motherly energy.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think, it's like that can seem silly to someone who does have human kids, and that I do recognize it is not the same.
But you love them dearly, and and you take care of them and you nurture them. Yeah,
it's because of how I'm made. Like I can see that. I can see I probably care for them. I think I care for them in a different way because I don't have any other.
But you're exercising and living out your mother instincts and nurturing and taking care of them. I'm telling you, you do some things for those dogs. I don't know that I do for my child, but I will say this. I kind of want to go back a little bit because one of the things, as a mom, I struggled with my identity as, that was who I was. Like somebody say, what, who are you? Or what, tell me something about you. And immediately I would say, I'm a mom or whatever. And I think that, we struggle because moms tend to sometimes feel like that's our identity. And I find it interesting. The reason I went to Genesis, there's so many passages and so many things we could talk about in Scripture. It talks about moms, and Paul talks about nurturing the church and uses that as a mother nursing her children. It's like taking care of the church, the body of Christ. But I feel like as I start thinking about motherhood and coming on, a lot of times people struggle with the fact that they aren't moms, or they're lost their moms, or their kids are grown, or they're out of, they're empty nesters and stuff, that they've lost their identity. And that's not true. And so the reason that I went with this verse is because God created Adam and Eve, and he wanted them, and they were his. That's their identity, is that they are his children. And that's our identity. And then when Adam and Eve sin, and we talked up, sin comes into the world. Then God, comes up and rescues, Adam and Eve and covers them with the blood of the animal. But he does send them out. But when he does, Adam changes Eve's name, which we talked about, from woman to Eve. And so living. And so what I want to say is that was not why God created her. God created her because he wanted them to be his children. It says, let us make man in our image. And so, they didn't say this was going to be our identity. Our identity is the fact that we're God's children. But we do know that Adam, was busy working and stuff. And it was about multiplying, about being able to produce and to multiply. And we know in Genesis 4, Eve finds out about the pain of sin and the fact that her, consequences was childbirth. It was pain in childbirth, and she does have a baby, and she's, having childbirth. And so I think what I want to say is that this now is where the world begins and starts to explode, and children are, is that multiplication. And I think that for first thing I want to say is that this is not our identity. Our identity is that we're a child of God. And then because of the fact that God does want us to multiply and does want us to, produce, I think, likeness, that would be the same as discipleship. That would be the same if you don't have children. It would be the same as someone that you could invest in and disciple them as a believer, that maybe someone that's younger in the faith than you are. I know, Cara, we were just talking about your small group. It's just, those are, people that are in your life that you're discussing, and you're walking life with them as disciples of Jesus, and you are producing and multiplying what you know and what God's taught you into those lives. So I think that there's a lot of ways that as we begin to think about moms, like we've talked about, there's just different ways of being able to say, I can express my nurturing by loving on other people, which I think is very wise.
And I think you can also, on both sides of it. So whether you are yearning to nurture and you maybe feel like you don't have that outlet because you don't have kids and want to have kids, or maybe
you're an empty
kids
nester.
Look different. Yeah, like maybe your motherhoodness looks different than you thought it would, or whatever it may be. Or if you're someone who longs for someone to nurture them, like if they're don't have a close relationship with their mom, or have lost their mom, or whatever that scenario. So I think on both sides of that, whether you're a man or a woman, I think that's part of the God has created us to want to be. But God has created us to want that care and nurture.
Sure.
So I think
somebody to see us, love us,
and so I think that that's part of it, where I think how God can redeem whatever aspect of motherhood that you may be missing or longing for or grieving or whatever. I think like that's where God can either redeem it and you can step into a different role, or someone can step into your life as a motherly or a nurturing figure, or God can, feeling God's nurture, feeling God's care, because that is an attribute of, like we were made in His image. So God is caring and nurturing and
absolutely
loving
Father.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that, Cara, you speak often, in the fact that, like being a single person and some of the issues being a single. And one of the things that, you're like, I want to have children. Of course, I want you to have children because I love my grandchildren and love to, for you to have children. Certainly a prayer that I have for you. But I just want to speak a little bit from my point of view of me and in my stage of life. So often, as you know, pretty old. And so often I hear and talk with women that are close to my age. There are very few women that are as old as I am, but that I talk to them, and I talk to women that their children are gone or their kids are gone, or, whatever, or the kids don't want to really have anything to do with them, unfortunately. But anyway, I'm going to speak just for me. And for whatever reason, and this wasn't something I went out to do. This is not something that was really on my agenda. It just evolved. I think by caring and loving people, God began to put people in my life that are a lot younger. I started, loving my grandchildren and investing in them. And I have friends, and I have women that are coming in my life. And, that I just love that. I love being a part of people's lives. I love walking life with people and encouraging them in their walk with Jesus. But, a lot of people my age feel like nobody wants to hear from them, or they don't feel that they have any purpose. And, their motherhood is now, the kids are gone and they're old, and they don't need them, anymore, but they do. And you can speak into that. I mean, I was very proud of you the other day. You said, I processed without you, Mom. And, and of course we laughed about that, but and I guess we could explain that. What that means is there are some times when you're dealing with some things, you want to process it. In other words, you want to talk to me about it. And I never know. I'm like, is this the time for me to talk, or are you processing?
Well, it wasn't anything deep, but yeah.
But
I made the decision and processed it all by myself.
I was so proud of you.
Proud of myself.
But, a lot of times women my age feel like there's no outlet. There's no one that really wants to hear their opinion or their experience. But I don't believe that. I think that's a lie. I think that is something that is keeping us as women that are older to feel like we have any purpose and anything to do. I mean, people just exist. And I just want to encourage anyone that's listening and entering in this conversation. If you feel like you're an empty nester, or you feel older, or you feel like maybe there's nothing, that no one in your life that you could pour into, I would ask God and pray for God to give you someone to do that. If your children are not asking you to speak into their lives, that's, there's nothing you can do about that. That's something, you can't just go and speak in somebody's life if they don't give you that permission. But God will bring you someone.
I think that's one thing that I've learned is, and not just, I think, in this area of motherhood, but in all areas with the Lord, is really holding all expectations loosely. So like how he might do something, because I think how I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation of how our brain can automatically fill in holes and knowns or even knowns, but we just assume. And I think we can do that a lot of times with how God works, we think, this is the way it should look like. This is what motherhood should look like, or this is what being
empty nester,
a wife or an empty nester, I don't know, like whatever, like I think we so often limit God from, he's a creator. He is creative. He can, it can look differently.
And he's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Things can look differently. So I think, I don't know what my literal motherhood is going to look like moving forward, but it does not look anything like I thought it would. Like I never in a million years would have thought that I wouldn't have any kind of kids now. And I think I wrestle a lot with, because I think there have been times where I've just thought, I'm just not going to have kids. But that was an element of me trying to deal with grief, like me just resolving, I'm just not going to have kids. But then I think wrestling with that with the Lord had brought me to more of an open-handed place of, I don't know what it's going to look like. I might bear kids. I may never bear kids. I might be a stepmom. Maybe my husband and I don't have kids and we invest and pour into someone else, like other people, or, we can do that if you also have kids. But I just mean I think it kind of it eventually brought me to a place of being more open-handed of I don't know what it's going to look like, but I do know that I want to mother, because that's not who I am. But I do have that nature that God has given me, just like he's given every woman, of, to nurture and to care. And so anyway, I think that, and wherever you are with the whole, Mother's Day and all that, I think that it could be, a prayer of help me dream up of what new it could look like, or what, and you may not get a vision of God telling you this is what it will be, but I think just opening your hands up to being it could look like, I don't even know, something that you maybe never would have dreamed of. And
it's God just surprised me.
Yeah.
Think,
or maybe it's exactly what you've dreamed of, I don't know. Right. I just think, I think having that open-handed of not pigeonholing even motherhood or being mothered, if you're on the side of desiring that, asking God, open my eyes to how I am being mothered, nurtured, or cared for in other ways, or even that's just, with him, not just with him, that's not important, but I just mean, because a lot of times could be just God mothering and nurturing, you.
Right. Yeah. I think it's that the thing that is so important as we enter into, celebrating, Mother's Day, is to know that there are people that need us. There are people that need love. There's people that need, like you said, feeling like, I want to be seen, or you care enough about what's going on in my life. There are people around us that are really needing someone to pour in their lives. And I think one of the most unhealthy thing that we can do is to put walls around our lives and think either one, too, oh, nobody cares about what I think, or I don't want to share my life with anyone, or I'm not going to allow anyone to come in my life. I think when we are so wrapped up in ourselves and we're just kind of thinking about ourselves, or we're thinking about what we want, what we don't want, what we have, what we don't have, and we begin to operate from that position, I think we close ourselves up to the possibility of allowing not only other people into our lives, but we pour into other people's lives. And it is extremely dangerous, to tell you the truth, because you're developing such a selfish mentality. And then you start thinking about, well, what are they doing for me? Or like, well, she's not pouring into me, or they're not talking to me. We begin to operate on a daily basis. We almost like walk out of the house, so to speak, into the world, waiting on everybody to nurture and take care of us and protect us. But if we begin to walk out and say, God, let me be aware of someone that might need me to pour into their life, and care about them and love them and pray for them and those kind of things, I think that would be a huge, healthy, spiritual desire of God for you. We're here for people. We're here to be able to help other people to know Jesus. But sometimes before they can know Jesus, they got to know that we care.
Yeah, I think that's one quality of women that God has, that we get from his nature that's not talked about a lot, is that selflessness aspect of it. And yes, men have it too. So I'm not saying that men don't. But if you were to think in your head of what a good mother would be, whether you had a good mother or not, I would be willing to bet one quality would be that they would do anything for their kids, which is selfless. Like that is a selfless characteristic. And so I think that's one of the most powerful things of being, living out. It's not just your motherhoodness, but it's living out being more like Christ in that way. Because kind of like just what you're saying made me think of that, because it's putting yourself aside and caring for someone else. It's putting, maybe you want to just be doing something else, and then a friend calls and they need your help, or, need to be poured into, or even like your own parents, I think that's just loving well, is putting yourself aside. And so I don't know, I think that's like one thing in living out this nature that God's given us. And again, I know men have it too. Like there's characteristics men have that we have, it's because I think it's from the Lord. I think it's that selfless nature, but I think that's because I think that with myself because I don't have kids, it could be very easy, which it could be easy for anyone to be selfish. Yeah. Let's be real. But even especially, with kids. Right. But I think that's one thing that I am just conscious of, is it's a little bit easier for me because I don't have, anyone tugging at me necessarily.
You have to be intentional.
Think it's a little, as little as it is having dogs, because there are times where I can't think about myself. Like if I planning a trip, I do have to think about them, or, like my day in, day out, but then I think even my family, like I think of times where it's not ideal, but I'll go make the drive to be at a birthday if I can. And I know I can't be at every little thing, but, so I think that's part of just living in that purpose of caring for others well. And I think it will also help, like if you're dealing with grief or sorrow surrounding Mother's Day, or just mothers in general, I think thinking outside of yourself, I know you say this a lot, thinking outside of yourself, it may not heal the wound, but I think it helps. It helps you not get stuck in it. I think it helps you not get depressed.
I always say a person that's wrapped up in themselves makes a small package. And I think that's one of the things that Jesus left heaven. He did not think, about
he didn't think of himself
in heaven.
Yeah.
He didn't. He came and left heaven and came and died. And based on everything we see in the gospel, he was very much giving himself away. And he ended up at the very end, even at the resurrection, said, it's good that I go away because I'm going to give you my Holy Spirit. So again, I think this is something as we are entering into, there's a lot going on in May. There's, besides Mother's Day, and there's graduations, and everybody says, well, it's kind of like almost like Christmas because there's so much going on. There's Mother's Day,
all the end of the year parties and school things, and
stuff.
yeah.
And it's hard. It is hard, and we're not saying to be everything to everybody, or you can't be. That's only Jesus can do that. But there are going to be people in your life that you can pour into. There are some people in your life that you can show kindness. You may not even know them that much, but as a mother that's nurturing and loving and caring, and trust me, when you're a new mom and you're up at night, and that baby is crying, changing its diaper, feeding it is so dependent on you. And I'm not saying to live your life in such a way that people are so dependent upon you, but there may be someone that's dependent on you at this period of time that you need to nurture them, to help them, to depend on God, and to help them and teach them how to depend on God. I was with someone just the other day, and they're, like, I don't even know how to depend on God. I don't know how to even ask God. I don't know how to pray, and it wasn't that I was trying them to do it the way that I do it, but as the only thing I knew how to do is show them how I did it, or talk about how I did it, but encourage them to go and pray in the way that feels comfortable for them. But at least I gave them a little bit of an understanding of what prayer is and how that they can start out the conversation with Jesus. So anyway, that's just one of those things that we have people all around us, and just because our children are there. And we're having to be busy. And there's periods and stages of life that there's no way we can pour into anybody else. I think we should pour into our family first. I think that's our first obligation if we have one. But if we don't, then there's the family of God that you can pour into and, and encourage them.
I think too, like the differentiation of not making someone dependent on you, but leading them to be dependent on the Lord. Because I was thinking of, I think it's Mary Magdalene, who she didn't have kids. And so a lot of her, she's a perfect example of her nurturing spirit and all that came, it's rooted in Jesus. And then, it's the people around her.
And she's one of the Marys that anointed Jesus's feet.
And I think that's like an important it doesn't define, I know you said this, but whatever your motherhood, like that doesn't define you, whether it's exactly what you want or nothing like what you want. And whether you don't have it and you desire it, and maybe, God can redeem it in a different way. I don't know. But I think I don't know. I guess that's like the hope is Jesus is very aware because he made women how he made us. To nurture and to care and to, the aspect of him. And so he wants to show us himself through that.
I guess what we're trying to say, hopefully we said it correctly, is that May, we're going to celebrate Mother's Day. And there are going to be a lot of different situations, different levels of either you're a new mom or you are a mom of a toddler or teenagers, or are you dealing with the death of a child? Or you're dealing with your mom is gone? Or you're dealing with empty nester? Or you're just dealing with the fact that right now you're hoping and praying that you're going to have children and get married, but you're not right now. There's, whatever. There's just so many stages and so many ways that we can approach Mother's Day as there's a loss. There's something missing. There's, like you said, it's not the way that we thought it was going to be. And so we're grieving. And of course, that's part of loving people is when we grieve. So what we're saying is we can approach this Mother's Day and life. It's not just this one particular time that we're celebrating it, but as we're saying is that God has put in all of us this nurturing and caring and loving one another, and we can pour into our lives, and we can pour into someone else's lives the things that we know, and to teach and to encourage them. So I think that's, as we end, is to say, Happy Mother's Day.
On whatever side you are on it. Yeah. Thanks for listening. I'm so glad that you could be a part of our conversation. To continue the conversation, you can find Dot on social media at .bowen, or visit her website, dotbowen.com. Subscribe, like, and share with your friends, and we will see you next week on Write This Down with Dot Bowen.